So, Brandon, have you been watching Paradise on Hulu?
How did you know that I've been watching Paradise? Have we talked about this?
No, we haven't talked about it.
It's so good. So I haven't watched the final episode. That's the only one I haven't watched, is the one that just aired this week. But I love the show. I actually told some Thunder Media in postgame the other night, we were talking about show recommendations, and I threw out Paradise from Hulu.
So you've watched through episode 7, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't want to drop any spoilers, but episode 7 was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable, and this is what I'll say about Paradise. Like, it is such a good show, just from a standpoint of like acting and the characters you dig, and there's like human drama. But then all I'll say is watch the first episode, and something happens in that first episode that just kind of completely flips what you're watching, and you don't expect it. I kind of get like Lost vibes from the show in a certain way. I think it's a brilliant show.
Welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you today?
I am doing well. I am fresh off of watching an SGA 50-piece up close and personal, so it's a good start to the week for the Thunder.
Well, we are going to break down the last 7 days of Thunder basketball, and of course we're going to talk about Shai's 50-point game again. Also, J-Dub gets a new career high, and the Thunder, they keep blowing big leads, and the last thing we'll talk about is the defense. Should we be concerned? But let's start with Shai's 51-point night against the shorthanded Rockets. The Thunder won that one 137-128, thanks to that pretty epic scoring barrage by SGA. He had 20 points in that first quarter where it looked like the Rockets were really feeling it. His scoring average is now 32.6. He leads the league. Tell us about your reactions to that SGA game, there being there in person and getting to witness that history.
Yeah, you saw it right away. Like you said, the 20-point opening quarter, and really they needed all 20 of SGA's points. They really needed all of SGA's 51 points on the night, because this frisky Rockets team, without Şengün or Amin Thompson or Dylan Brooks or Fred VanVleet, they were pesky. Reed Shepherd goes off for a career high. Cam Whitmore was really good. Jabari Smith Jr., Jalen Green. So, it's maybe the Ewing effect or whatever it was, or maybe the Thunder's defense wasn't there as usual, as it usually is, because they were shorthanded. But SGA was the entire offense in the first quarter. He scored or assisted on 24 of the Thunder's 30 opening quarter points. But when he scores 20 in the first quarter, and the Rockets look like they're going to be competitive from the jump, you're kind of like, is this going to be another 50-point night for Shai? And then sure enough, third quarter, he scores 17 points. So at the end of the third quarter, he has 45 points, and the Rockets are being just competitive enough to where you're like, hey, Shai might be able to come back in this and get 5 more points, and sure enough, he did.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point, because in that fourth quarter, and we're going to talk about the blown leads, though, again, but the Thunder got up big in the fourth quarter, and I kind of thought, well, maybe Shai's night is done. He's not going to get 50, and as the game got a little bit closer, I was maybe kind of happy, because I like to see Shai get 50, but I think it got a little closer than I would have preferred.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things as a fan of a team, you want to see them, just kind of put their foot down and dominate the opponent and run away with the 20-point lead, and you don't have to worry about the game. You don't have to stress. But at the same time, you're like, well, if the Rockets hit a couple more shots and get it to within like 12 or 13, Shai's going to have to come back in, and he'll easily get 5 points, right? And that's what happened. I think a big part of this was Shai's three-point volume. He was 5 of 9 from 3 for the night, 18 of 30 from the field, 10 of 10 perfect from the free throw line. By the way, for those saying free throw merchant, if there's any lingering opponent fans out there. 2 of those were technical fouls, so he truly only had 8 free throws on 30 field goal attempts. 7 assists on the night, 5 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block. What was interesting to me, though, he could have easily gone for his career high of 54. He didn't take another shot for the last 3 minutes, and he was out there because the Rockets were still within, punching distance. He could have easily gone for it, but he passed up shots he could have taken and looked for other guys and looked for the best shot, and that's what happened down the stretch. But he could have easily gone for 55, 56, 57 that night.
Well, it sounds like that's the hallmarks of a leader and maybe an MVP winner. But in the latest NBA.com MVP ladder, SGA fell to number 2 behind the Joker. Now, granted, he's been having a great year, and Jokic is averaging a triple-double. The Nuggets are playing really well right now. They're a threat to take the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. How close do you think this MVP race is?
I think that there is a gap. I know that, the NBA.com poll, but 1, I think, they need to have some drama down the stretch. And 2, that's ultimately just one person's opinion. If you look at like straw polls, I know like ESPN ran a straw poll of actual voters. And then if you look at betting odds, like Vegas odds, Shea's firmly in the lead, and he should be. Obviously, Jokic is putting up silly numbers, but the Thunder have an 11-game lead over the Nuggets. They have half as many losses as the Nuggets have. Shea's doing this with one of the youngest teams in the NBA. Shea's doing this without his, arguably second-best player gone for most of the season, and then guys like Hartenstein and Caruso missing big chunks of the season. And, there should be some voter fatigue, because if you're just going to hand it to Jokic because you feel like he's the best player in the league, well, then Michael Jordan should have got 10 MVPs. LeBron should have had, 8 or 9 MVPs if you just hand it to the best player. When you look at the overall picture, I think that Shea is and should be firmly in the lead. Now, I will say the Thunder and Nuggets have a doubleheader in Oklahoma City this coming Sunday and Monday, and I think for some voters that will be a tiebreaker, and maybe it'll sway votes. So hopefully the Thunder take care of business. At worst, if you split against the Nuggets, I think things stay the same and Shea wins this thing down the stretch. The only worry would be, if the Nuggets win both of those games and Jokic outplays Shea, then, maybe some worry about the MVP race as far as Shea is concerned.
So do you think that the win or loss result is going to have an impact on the potential MVP race more so than the stats? So let's say OKC wins both games, but SGA averages 25 points, but J-Dub has a great game one night. Chet has a great game the other night. But for the Nuggets, maybe they stay close solely because Jokic is keeping them in the game. Could that sway people more towards the Jokic side, or do you think SGA needs to have a big game to sort of solidify the front-runner status?
It could sway for sure some voters, but I think ultimately if the Thunder were to win both of those games, the Thunder would win this season series 3-1, and obviously the gap in the standings would be that much bigger. Those 2 wins would be fresh on everybody's minds. As long as Shea doesn't just have 2 totally dud games, if he were to get 25 and play well, I think that would be fine. But, hopefully, obviously, Shea plays really well. And if Shea outplay, I'll say this on the flip side of all of that, if Shea were to outplay Jokic in both of those games, or, overall picture, Shea outplays Jokic in those 2 games and the Thunder win both of those games, I think it's over. I think the MVP race is decided after those 2 games in that scenario.
Well, some big games ahead then. But back to the win against the Rockets, that gave the Thunder 50 wins on the year. They hit 50 before any team in the Western Conference even hit 40. And the last team to achieve such a feat was the 2004-2005 Miami Heat. However, the Heat ended up winning 59 games and they lost in the conference final, so we'll set that aside. But Oklahoma City has been really dominant in the Western Conference. They are up 10.5 games right now on the Lakers and 11 on the Nuggets, as you noted. But we talked about this a little bit last week. The Lakers have now won 7 straight. Is there a chance, maybe assuming there aren't any injuries or unexpected occurrences, that the Lakers could push Oklahoma City for that number 1 seed?
No, I think the gap is too big and there's not enough time left. I mean, the Lakers have 21 losses. I don't see the Thunder getting 10 more losses. There's 21 games left. And so you're looking at the Thunder going, 11-10, and the Lakers winning out. So, no, I think that the 1 seed is pretty much a done deal unless something catastrophic happened as far as like injuries go. I think the Thunder have the 1 seed securely in the bag. Now, that said, you want to keep winning. You want to keep that gap. One, because you want to keep pace with the Cavs if possible, if it ultimately comes down to a home court scenario in a finals. But also just, for the MVP race, to keep consistency. And, I think they're chasing and want to break the Thunder all-time record of 60 wins. What's crazy is all they have to do is go 11-10 the rest of the way to beat the all-time Thunder record. And this is, the KD, Russ, James Harden era. Harden wasn't a part of the team, actually, that won 60. But pretty impressive what they can accomplish this season. And it's looking more like 65 wins is on the table.
Well, another player who had a career scoring night was Jalen Williams. So J-Dub had a career-high 41 in the 146-132 win over the Spurs. We've talked about this many times. It does seem like J-Dub doesn't get as much respect from the local fans as he does nationally. Like, he got the All-Star nod, but, there's a lot of Thunder fans asking, well, is he really a max player? He's inconsistent offensively, but he's been really good this season. He earned the All-Star nod, and I think another notch in his belt is that 41-point career scoring night, where he hit 63% from the field, 50% from three. He was perfect from the line, and he also had 6 rebounds and 6 assists. So break down J-Dub's career night for us.
I think the most impressive part, obviously the scoring, 41 points, 15 of 24, 4 of 8 from 3. Just the efficiency pops out. The fact that he did this with 0 turnovers is just wild to me. And, he just stuffs the box score in every single area every night. He really doesn't have a true weakness. 41, 6, 6, 1, 1, and 0 turnovers. So if you look at that back-to-back, the Spurs and Rockets, he ends up scoring 65 points with 1 total turnover. If you look at his regular season, he's averaging 21.4 on 48% from the field, 36.4 from three-point range, 5.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 1.7 steals, 0.7 blocks, and playing elite defense. Versatile defense, guarding 1 through 5, truly filled in at center for several games while the Thunder didn't have Chet or Hartenstein. So you're talking about a possible All-NBA defensive guy. With all the injuries going on, possible third-team All-NBA is on the table. He's an all-star. Scores... I don't know what else you want from the guy, and he's 23 years old. I think he's having a fantastic season. And by the way, his scoring and efficiency is picking up at just the right time down the stretch. He's now, in his last 5 games, gone for 24, 41, 20, 22, and 27, so over 20 in 5 straight games. And in the last 3 games, he's hit 4 threes in each of those games, 4 of 5, 4 of 8, 4 of 8. So anything you want to see from J-Dub, he's doing it right now.
And I think it's great timing, too, because if he can kind of stay hot and heat up and find his groove headed into the playoffs, if we have a 1-2 punch with SGA number 1 and J-Dub playing like this as the number 2, I think the Thunder are going to be really tough to beat in the playoffs.
Yeah, because that was, for many people, the only question. Obviously Shea's going to be good for 30 and be dominant in the playoffs. We saw last year against the Mavs that he's a playoff riser, so you don't have to worry about Shea. And this defense was going to translate to the postseason. The Thunder have good role players. You have Chet, you have Hartenstein, you have size and bigs and defense. The question was, can J-Dub translate as a secondary scorer? He did during the regular season last year. He has during the regular season this year. The worry was, he didn't rise in that Mavs series last year. I think it's a small sample size, but if J-Dub can play like he's been playing lately, or like we've seen throughout this season and last season in the playoffs, the Thunder are going to be in really, really good shape.
Well, speaking of career highs, let's talk about career highs and career scoring nights for the Thunder opponents, because to me it's a little bit baffling, or maybe it's every fan base feels this, but Stephen Castle for the Spurs had a career high. I think he was one off scoring his career high. He had 32 points off the bench for the Spurs. So it seems like the supporting players of the opponents always go off against Oklahoma City. Cam Whitmore had a season-high 27 against Oklahoma City. You mentioned Reed Sheppard, who was averaging a full 3.9 points per game, blew well past his career high of 16 to score 25 against Oklahoma City. Day'Ron Sharpe scored a career high of the Nets. Killian Hayes had a season high for the Nets. What's the deal, Brandon? Why do all these supporting players go nuts against the Thunder?
I wish I had a good explanation. I think some of it is scheme, like, we famously saw with PJ Washington, keep bringing up the Mavs series. You want to take out the opponent's best players, and I think the Thunder do a good job of that they scheme against opponent's best scorers, and sometimes that's going to leave other guys, a little bit more open, a little bit more free reign, and if a guy sees a couple of shots go down, he can give some confidence. I think maybe lately with the Reed Sheppards and the Stephon Castles, this is an 82-game season is long, and this is post-All-Star break, a team that has a sizable lead for first seed in the West, and the offense has been clicking. So you could understand if the defense, if the effort and fight and energy isn't quite what it's been all season long. Like, this team has earned this number one seed because their defense has been elite all season, just locked down, historic, and, it hasn't quite been there since post All-Star break. And you got to wonder if some of that is like, hey, you can't expect them to do this for a full 82. Maybe they're playing 80% defense during this little stretch. But when they need to lock in, and we saw this against the Spurs specifically in the second half. Like, the first half, the Spurs went off there 16 and 26 from three. Maybe the closeouts weren't quite there. But in the second half, I can't remember what they went now. I know they didn't. I know in the third quarter they went 0 for 8 from three after going 16 to 26 from three in the first half. I can't remember the fourth quarter stats, but the effort was there in the second half. So when they need to turn it on, when they need to flip the switch, we're still seeing that. So I think some of that's just, maybe, not 100%. The defense, what we've seen previously, but I think we can trust it in the playoffs when they need to crank it up.
Yeah, and the Spurs were 2 of 17 from three in the second half, so a pretty big difference between the first half and the second half for the Spurs, who couldn't miss in that first half. But it sounds like I'm getting your answer to my next question, the next segment already, but let's go through it as well. So post All-Star break, it seems there has been a trend of the Thunder blowing leads, or in the case of the Nets, kind of having to stage a pretty remarkable comeback. So just to walk through some of these blown leads. Against Houston, they had a 17-point lead that in the first half that dwindled to 6. They had I think it was the third quarter, but they had an 18-point fourth quarter lead against Houston, and then that shrank to 6 points in the fourth quarter. They had a 8-point early lead against the Spurs, but before halftime they were already down 9 points, the Thunder were. They had a 20-point second quarter lead versus the Hawks that fell to 5 points at the break. And then they had a 27-point third quarter lead versus the Hawks, and that shrank to 11 points in the fourth. That comes on the heels of that blown 25-point lead in that loss to the Wolves, and then the game before that, another blown lead, which was 19 points, before they had to stage a furious comeback to win the game. What's going on? The Thunder, to me, I don't know if it is the post-All-Star break. They played a lot of games lately. They're put maybe a little more cruise control. They clearly have the ability to build these big leads and dominate other teams. But why do they keep letting the teams back into the game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the bright side is they still only lost to the Wolves post All-Star break, but we have seen this trend lately, and I think it just is a deal where 82 games is long, and the style that the Thunder play is just 100% effort from every guy that steps on the floor. And I do think that's ultimately hard to do over an 82-game season, and they did it pretty much every game pre-All-Star break. So understandable, you take a week off, come back, and you have this stretch run before the playoffs, and you want to gear up for the playoffs. It also, coincidentally, same time that they're trying to kind of implement double bigs and kind of work out those lineups. And, defensively, when you're playing double bigs, I think there's some real positives overall to the double bigs lineups. But it's definitely a different look, and the defense hasn't quite been there because they don't cause the turnovers because you don't have all these guards and wings just swarming guys and creating chaos. And you don't have, the quickness maybe sometimes to close out at all 5 spots that you did before. So I think some of it's double bigs. Some of it's the effort, the 100% effort isn't there every single minute of the game like we saw before. But I think ultimately those issues will be worked out in the playoffs because the 100% effort is going to be there. Double bigs, I think, will be implemented strategically and not full time against certain teams and lineups and situations. So I think ultimately it's not a big worry. It's definitely a trend right now, though, that I can understand the concern. But the good news is the offense has taken a turn for the better as well, and the shooting has taken a turn for the better as well. Maybe that's a part of it as well, because the offense has been playing better, so you don't feel like the defense needs to be, as locked in as before.
Well, let's get into the defensive struggles, because it seems like maybe that's the issue where teams are able to stage these furious comebacks against the Thunder because of defensive breakdowns, because it isn't really the offense. The scoring has been there. But you mentioned the double big lineups, and in sort of the two-man lineups that have played over 30 minutes, I think this is a number that blows my mind. The Hartenstein-Holmgren duo has the worst defensive rating for the team, and it's 117.1 in 114 minutes played. So it's not like an entirely too small sample size. And if I cut out ones that were under 30 minutes, but a 30-minute sample size for a two-man lineup is an extraordinarily small sample size. So you'd think there'd be quite a few between 30 and 114 that had a worse defensive rating. So what's going on with that double big lineup? Is that built more for offense than it is defense?
I think some of it really is the teams that they're playing those, because right now they just want to get the data points. They want to get the chemistry. They want to see what that looks like. I do think that, a lot of the defensive chaos has been built around these wings and perimeter guys, these guards who can just swarm teams, and they, can close out quickly. They can switch quickly. And while the double bigs, I do think, provide some positives offensively, and ultimately, you do get two of your best players on the floor at the same time, they don't create the turnovers and the fast breaks and the chaos that we've seen before, because you take away an element, you take away one guard. Let's say you're taking away Casey Wallace or Alex Caruso out of the equation and inserting a 7-footer. There can be some positives, the rebounding and what you can do offensively with those guys. But I can see why it would affect the defense. So yeah, I think that's a part of it for sure. Also, this is new. This is a new thing for Chet specifically. Playing the 4 instead of the 5, and it's a new thing for the team as a whole to have Chet play the 4 and to have double bigs. So there obviously be some kinks to work out and some chemistry issues to work out as well.
So you think they should stay committed to that double big lineup, kind of see what works and maybe identify for the playoffs the spots that it works the best?
I do think that if they're going to need to play double bigs in the playoffs for certain matchups, let's just say it's against the Nuggets, you want to trot out double bigs because that's your best look. I would rather have, a sample size in the regular season that you built some chemistry and you worked out, the issues that you needed to work out and saw how different things looked with both of those guys on the court, than just kind of go in blind and like, okay, it's playoffs now. Let's hope this works and let's see how this works. And if it's going to ultimately not be a great lineup for them against anybody, they need to see that too. They need to see if it's a net negative no matter who they're going up against, even if it is the Nuggets. So I understand why they're doing it. I understand why you'd want to see that, as Mark says, to collect the data on those lineups to see what works and what doesn't. So, yeah, I think that they should stay committed to playing those two together. Also, they really are. Chet's obviously a top 2 or 3 player on this team. Isaiah Hartenstein is a top 5 player on this team. Both those guys need minutes, and so there's going to be some overlap. And so, yeah, I get it. You need to play those guys some minutes together.
And I'll say I really did enjoy the Hartenstein Holmgren lobs and the Holmgren Hartenstein lobs. So, hey, more of that is fine with me. But for comparison's sake, because I was looking at the 2-man lineups, it's not a Holmgren issue, I guess, because if you have Caruso and Holmgren on the court at the same time, that pairing has an offensive rating of 119.9 and a defensive rating of 81.3 in 97 minutes. That's a net rating of 38.7.
That's nuts. Yeah,
unbelievable.
And here's I just want to put this out there. I know a lot of people have been frustrated about Alex Caruso missing games and missing time. I really think they're just being cautious with Alex Caruso. Now, he plays 100% all the time, no matter what. He's constantly diving on the floor and hitting the ground. I think a lot of these, if this were the playoffs and he needed to play, he'd probably be playing. But the Thunder, again, have an 11-game lead for first, and they have the luxury of being cautious with little nicks and bruises for Caruso. So I wouldn't be frustrated. The most important thing is to have him healthy for the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I have that in my notes too, because he left the Houston game early with an ankle sprain. He's going to miss tonight's game against Memphis, and Caruso has missed 22 games this season, so he's missed over a third of the year. And really, in the playoffs, you don't want that guy missing a third of the games in the playoffs.
No, he's too important. I mean, he is a big X factor for this Thunder team, especially when he's hitting his threes as he's been doing lately. He really is such a huge positive impact player when he's on the court. He's, like you said, he's missed a third of the games, but when he's on there, even if he's not scoring, his defense and what he contributes as a whole, just a big, big positive player. And the swapping of Giddey, by the way, shout out Giddey. He's been playing really well with the Bulls. I think we all saw this coming. Giddey needed the ball in his hands to be on a team like the Bulls, and he was going to put up good numbers. Good for them and good for the Thunder, because in the playoffs, swapping Giddey for Caruso is exactly what the Thunder need.
Well, I don't want to set aside my questioning of the defense, because I do think it's worth kind of discussing, because if there are some warts that we've seen post All-Star break, it really has been the defense, and some other numbers to look at. The defensive rating pre-All-Star game was 104.5, and then now post All-Star break, it's 117.1, which is now 22nd in the lead. So they have a league-leading defensive rating. They still have maintained that post All-Star break, but it has dipped pretty significantly and now kind of in the back half of the league over the last few games. And they've kind of allowed these huge explosions in points in the first halves for teams. Like the Brooklyn Nets scored 76 against the Thunder in the first half. I mean, to me, that's almost inexcusable. Like that's got to be breakdowns in rotations, breakdowns in the defensive structure, but also maybe just a lack of focus to allow a team like the Nets to score 76 against you.
Yeah, again, I don't want to just, kind of excuse it. The larger sample size of pre-All-Star break and seeing how dominant this defense could be, I feel like it's still there. I think it really comes down to a combination of it being a long season and the focus and effort isn't there for all 48 minutes in these games post All-Star break, especially when you see it happening specifically against teams like the Nets or a wounded Spurs team or a Rockets team that isn't playing all their guys. Like, it tends to be happening against these teams, which means probably, it's not the 100% defensive effort that we've seen from this team. And I'm encouraged by the fact that when they need to, the defense cranks up and gets stops. even that the one loss that they had, that awful Wolves loss where they blew the 25-point lead, I think the worst loss of the season. The biggest issue with that game was that the Thunder couldn't buy a bucket the last 4 minutes of the game. It wasn't necessarily defense that game. We've seen when they need to put clamps on defense, they're still able to bring it. So I just trust right now the larger sample size pre-All-Star break. But you're right, though. It's been an issue for sure in these post-All-Star break games, especially against teams like the Nets.
Well, and there'll be a pretty good test tonight against Memphis of whether the team is still struggling defensively or if it's just a matter of they're picking their spots and they can lock down when they need to. But we'll highlight also the offense, which has been so good. You made a note of that. I would further note, while the Thunder have fallen to, as far as defensive rating, post All-Star break, their offensive rating leads the league. That's 127.4, which is like a staggering offensive rating. And over the last 12 games, the Thunder lead the NBA in three-point shooting percentage. So something has turned from their earlier season struggles from behind the arc. They've rectified those, and they're scoring at will now.
Yeah, the offense has been nuts. A large part of this, I do think, is J-Dub has, taken his offense to a level that I think we all hoped we would see, and he's been really consistent. Also, guys like Aaron Wiggins, this last game against the Rockets was the first game since the start of February where he didn't get double digits, and he's been really efficient. Isaiah Joe, I know he's been hurt the last couple of games, but he's been great off the bench, and his three-point shooting. Caruso, all of a sudden, everybody on the team remembered how to shoot. and this was the number one three-point shooting team in the league last season. And obviously, the first half of the season, it wasn't the case at all. But since January 1st, I believe they're still the number one three-point shooting team by percentage in the league since January 1st. All these guys can shoot for the most part. And we're seeing that kind of come to fruition now. When this team is clicking offensively, they're going to be really, really hard to stop, especially when the effort is there defensively and they're bringing the clamps on defense, because we know that they can do that. But it is kind of funny how this team has kind of flipped from being a defensive juggernaut for most of the season to, shooting being a struggle to all of a sudden they're an offensive juggernaut, and there's question marks about the defense lately.
Well, and one other stat on how good the three-point shooting has been. Post All-Star break, Adam Flagler is shooting 100% from three.
That's all you needed to say. That tells you everything you need to know. The team as a whole, the shooting, when those shots are going down, this Thunder team is so fun to watch because they generate good shots. And there's so many games where, there was post-game questions to Mark, I was happy with the offense because we generated good looks. They just didn't go down. Well, they're going down now, and the offense looks really, really pretty when the shots are going down. And
what I've noticed, I guess especially over the recent games here, is how confident the supporting cast is at shooting those threes. There's no hesitation for Wiggins to take a three, and sometimes he's going to take a step back three. He's not just taking catch and shoots. Lou Dort against the Rockets, I think, was almost looking for that three-point shot. There was no hesitation, and he hit a couple of really big buckets in the fourth quarter. So it's not like these guys are taking these open shots and they're only taking them because nobody's defending them. They are taking confident threes, and maybe that confidence is helping contribute to the ball going into the basket.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a testament to this team and the coaches and the leadership from Shea that they encourage all these players. It's a true thing with this Thunder team where they trust every single one of these guys. They want all of these guys to put up shots. You don't have to be a superstar on this team for them to trust you. If they swing it over to Casey Wallace, who, by the way, has been shooting well as well lately, they want him to shoot it. If they swing it over to Aaron Wiggins, they want him to shoot it. 1 through 15 or 17 or whatever it is, they trust you to shoot the ball, and they have confidence in you. So I think it's kind of a testament to the culture of this team. I think that looking back on these last several games, 137, 146, 135, 129, 131, 130, 130. Those are all the points that the Thunder have scored in each game since the All-Star break. That's nuts. The lowest is 129. I think part of this is Chet being back as well. We've said all season long, Chet is a big key. Having a 7'1" guy who can shoot and space the floor for Shea and J-Dub and give them that space to drive. And the threat of having a 7-footer out there on the perimeter would help this offense so much. And I do think that he's a part of this as well.
Let's look ahead to the next 4 games. So last week, you predicted a 4-0 week. You were successful on that as the Thunder beat the Nets, beat the Hawks, beat the Spurs, and then beat the Rockets. This week, probably a little bit tougher slate, starting tonight against Memphis, in Memphis, on national TV, a later start on ESPN. And then there is a home game against Portland, which the Thunder hopefully should win that game. And then you got that back-to-back against Denver, both games at home. So now, coming off a perfect prediction last week, what are you predicting for this week?
I will say 3-1. I think the Thunder win on ESPN tonight against the Grizzlies. They don't have Jaren Jackson Jr., an enormous part of their team, and the Grizzlies have been struggling lately. The Trailblazers all of a sudden could be angling for that number 10 spot in the play-in, and they've been playing really well lately, but they're also hurt right now. And it's still – the Thunder have won – I can't remember. It's been a while since I've tweeted it. How many games in a row the Thunder have beaten the Blazers? It's like 14 or 15 in a row right now. I think that continues. And I think that they split that Nuggets doubleheader. I don't know which one they win, which one they lose, but I think the Thunder gets one and the Nuggets get one.
Okay, well – I kind of expect that if they're going to split the games against Denver, Sunday's game is going to be the one that they win because it's a noon start, national broadcast on ABC. Sunday, weekend start. I imagine the crowd is going to be there early, be there loud, and be hyped.
That's a good point. That is a good point. Man, there are going to be so many narratives going on after that game, one way or another. If the Thunder win, it's going to be all about SGA has the MVP wrapped up. If the Nuggets win, the narrative is going to be, Jokic is going to make a late push. This is all of a sudden like a true two-man race. It could go either way. So, get ready one way or another for those narratives after that noon nationally broadcast game.
Well, and it being a home back-to-back, and Chet typically missing at least one game of back-to-backs. Do you think Chet's going to only play one out of the 2?
I do. That seems to be what the Thunder are doing with Chet. He's, by the way, it's really nice to see that Chet played in that Rockets game because he had that ankle sprain, and we kind of wondered, how long he'd be out with that ankle sprain. He only missed one game, and it was a back-to-back, so he missed the first game of back-to-back. So, I think that Chet will miss one of those Nuggets game, and I think that you're right. I think it's probably more likely he plays that Sunday game because it is nationally broadcast. So it would make sense for Chet to play that game. So, I'll agree with you. I think that the Thunder win that game and then drop the one the night after.
Well, before we close, Brandon, anything else you want to add?
I will go back to the cold open and recommend Paradise once again. Such a good show. And honestly, you brought that up at the beginning of the show, and I kind of just been thinking about it ever since and kind of wish this podcast was a Paradise podcast.
I know, because I'd love to talk more about what happened.
I know.
But certainly want to respect the listeners and not drop any spoilers.
But this is going to be a fun week of Thunder basketball. Those 2 Nuggets games, and by the way, next week is a crazy schedule. The Thunder have a really tough stretch coming up, so I'm excited about this stretch that the Thunder have coming and see how they perform.
Yeah, that's right. After this week, they've got Boston on the road, and then a back-to-back on the road against Detroit, who the Pistons have been playing really, really well lately, and then against the Bucks. So lots more to talk about on the pod coming up, but that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast, and he's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcast. And we'll be back in your feed soon.